The Andrioth expanse stretched out before Kael'Varus like a tapestry of death and beauty. He steered his battered shuttle through the lavender haze of dusk, the horizon shimmering with distant storms. Immense dust devils scuttled across rust-colored plains, and phosphorescent fungi clung to cracked basalt formations, casting an otherworldly glow. He had been drifting from system to system for months, an exiled pilot with a fractured past, until rumors of a deserted Xylorian fortress reached him through hushed channels in the fringe markets of Rhea Station. Now, as he peered out at the monolithic structure rising on the horizon, Kael felt a tremor of both dread and anticipation. The fortress's silhouette was jagged, almost menacing. Dozens of spires arched skyward, fractured and pockmarked by centuries of cosmic erosion. Its outer walls, once polished alloy, had oxidized into dull reds and purples, occasionally glinting in the fading light. Scars from long-dead skirmishes marred the ramparts, deep gouges where alien artillery had blasted footholds into the stone. Yet beneath the decay, Kael detected a stubborn persistence, as though the structure refused to surrender entirely to dust and oblivion. He guided the shuttle into a collapsed courtyard. Massive blocks of alloyed stone, some as large as cargo containers, lay scattered across the ground, remnants of the fortress's ceremonial gates. The mechanics of his ship groaned as it settled onto a cracked landing platform. Engines cooled. With a hiss, and Kael squeezed through the narrow hatch, activating his portable shield generator to guard against latent radiation. The device emitted a soft hum and cast a pale blue aura around him, an outward manifestation of his resolve to claim this place for himself. Though he packed little more than a few days' worth of rations, a compact energy rifle, and a data pad, loaded with star charts, Kael felt an odd surge of confidence. He had lost nearly everything during the fall of Varen Prime, his home world shattered by corporate megacities warring over terraforming rights. In the ensuing collapse, he became both fugitive and survivor, haunted by guilt over decisions he could not reverse. Exile had become his only constant, but here, in this fractured fortress, anonymity beckoned like a promise. He could vanish among the relics of a species no longer spoken of in polite conversation, bury himself in dust, and never look back. The shuttle hatch sealed behind him with a pneumatic click. Kael consulted his data pad. The only schematic he managed to salvage hinted at a vast central hall, several hidden galleries, and subterranean levels filled with alien machinery. According to the legend, the Xylorians had wielded energies that could bend space-time itself, technology so advanced that even the Unified Council dismissed it as myth. If even a fraction of that were true, gaining control of this fortress could rewrite the terms of his future. He trudged across the courtyard, boots crunching on gravel-like fragments of circuitry and alloy. The walls rose on either side, hundreds of meters tall, punctuated by narrow slits that once served as observation windows. Strange bioluminescent vines, remnants of the Xylorians' experimental botany, snaked across the surfaces, their pale teal glow casting dancing shadows. The sensation of being watched prickled his skin, although he presumed only echoes of ancient sentinels lingered here. Still, each footstep felt heavy, as if waking slumbering giants. At the threshold of the main gate, Kael paused. Two towering statues flanked the entrance, elongated, spindly figures carved from obsidian-like stone. Their features were inscrutable, no eyes to track his movements, no mouth to form judgment. Yet their posture exuded solemnity. One held a crystalline orb aloft, the other extended a hand in silent offering. As Kael approached, the statue's surfaces glinted, revealing intricate runes he could not decipher. He ran a gloved finger along one glyph, and for a moment, the rune shimmered, a fleeting pulse of azure light, then died back into muted metal. He frowned, half expecting an alarm or trap to trigger, but the gate remained inert. Within, the grand hall yawned before him. Its ceiling towered 60 meters overhead, supported by a ring of corpse-like columns that spiraled up like petrified tendrils. Despite centuries of neglect, the architecture retained an austere elegance, arches that formed perfect hexagons, melding geometry with an almost aquatic fluidity. Panels of cracked, translucent material, once pure crystal, stretched across the roof, fragmented now into jagged sections. Faint starlight filtered through, casting prismatic shards of color that danced across the dust-choked floor. The walls bore reliefs depicting Xylorian history. Colossal starships gliding between nebulae, winged figures channeling arcs of emerald energy, entire worlds swirling in the grasp of glowing hands. Their forms were humanoid, but otherworldly. Tall and slender, with skin that radiated faint bioluminescence. Their eyes, carved deep into stone, seemed to track Cale's movement. He felt the weight of their gazes as though he had intruded on something sacred and forbidden. Beneath the reliefs, console-like structures held silent for centuries, their interfaces encrusted with cosmic detritus. Cale knelt and brushed debris from a control panel. Nothing hummed or sparked. Yet he retrieved his portable sensor and ran, a quick diagnostic. There was residual power in the circuits, dim but present. Wary of lingering radiation or toxic mold, Cale recalibrated his sensor to scan for biocontaminants. The readings indicated only trace levels of inert compounds, likely byproducts of the fortress's auto-maintenance once shutting down millennia ago. He allowed himself a rare half-smile. If the structure's environment wasn't actively hostile, it meant he could focus on uncovering what lay beneath, rather than worrying about immediate threats. He set up a temporary base near a collapsed dais at the far end of the hall. Here, old scaffolding formed makeshift barricades around a tangle of exposed conduits and fractured data cores, one of which still pulsed with a rhythmic glow. Cale salvaged a fragment of that data core, jerry-rigging it into a power cell for his lights and portable scanner. The device flickered to life, revealing the hall's dimensions in cold wireframe on his wrist display. Nearly 800 meters in length, with multiple side corridors branching off like the tentacles of some great beast. Over the next week, Cale fell into a cautious routine of exploration and sustenance. Each dawn, though the concept of morning here was relative as the planet's extended rotation yielded days that stretched over 40 Earth hours, he ventured deeper into the fortress. He navigated through collapsed sections, clambering over broken staircases and ducking beneath rusted servo mechanisms. Outside, he hunted for small luminescent lizards among the basalt fields and harvested black moss that grew near thermal vents, which he boiled down to extract nutrients. His rations dwindled, but he rationed carefully, knowing resupply opportunities were scarce. During these forays, he encountered evidence of previous explorers, holographic markers left by scavengers who likely perished seeking rumored Xylorian artifacts. Occasionally, he found charred remnants of energy cells and fragments of hollowed-out cases stenciled with smugglers' insignias. Their sabotage attempts had collapsed certain corridors or rendered stairwells impassable, and in some areas cave-ins loomed like silent landmines. Cale had to rely on both his sensor and intuition, probing rubble for structural instabilities and listening for the subtle shifts of settling stone. One evening, after sealing a breach in the fortress's solar array to channel power back to his makeshift hub, Cale rested beneath the fractured glass of the central atrium. The hexagonal panels above, though cracked, still caught stray starlight from Andrioth's binary suns, refracting it into a kaleidoscope of blues and purples. In that muted glow, the reliefs on the walls seemed to come alive. You could almost hear distant hymns echoing through time. Cale let that moment wash over him, his mind drifting to memories of Varan Prime, the cobalt seas, the spires of crystal skyscrapers, the cries of people as corporations razed neighborhoods for new revenue streams. Regret, old and unyielding, rose, like bile in his throat. He shuddered and struck a spark against flint, lighting a small bioluminescent lamp to banish the ghosts. Late that night, in the dim corridor outside his shelter, Cale's sensor beeped with an unexpected fluctuation, a low-level energy signature weaving through the station's bowels. Heart lurching, he recalibrated the scanner. The spike was faint, almost imperceptible, yet distinct from the static he'd grown accustomed to. It beckoned him deeper down a passageway he hadn't yet explored. He hesitated. He knew better than to rush headlong into unknown corridors. But something primal, an echo of Xylorian design, drew him on. He armed his rifle and slipped down the narrow hallway, using the soft glow of his lamp to illuminate the glyphs etched into the walls. These symbols were unfamiliar, interlocking, loops and concentric circles that pulsed with a feeble teal glow whenever he drew near. The farther he ventured, the stronger the energy signature became, resonating through his boots and up his spine. He descended a spiral staircase carved directly into living rock, each step worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic. Dust rose in motes like tiny galaxies swirling in the beam of his lamp. At the base of the staircase, he encountered a sealed hatch embedded in the cavern floor. The hatch bore no handle or obvious keyhole. Instead, it was etched with a sigil, resembling a spiraling nebula, a motif he had seen in the reliefs upstairs where Xylorians conducted celestial rites. He pressed his palm against the sigil. The stone was ice cold, yet as his skin made contact he felt a subtle vibration, like the hum of a distant engine. Hesitating only a moment, he applied gentle pressure. The hatch shuddered, then sank into the floor with a grinding hiss, revealing a narrow shaft descending into darkness. Adrenaline pumped through Cale's veins as he activated his spectral lantern. Its bluish-white beam cut through the darkness without interfering with magnetic fields. He climbed down, each rung on the ladder cold and slick with condensation. The shaft broadened into a long corridor, its walls lined with veins of crystalline material that glowed faintly, residual power that had somehow persisted despite millennia of decay. The air here felt different, charged, tinged with ozone, as if this was the fortress's very heart. After what felt like an eternity, the corridor widened into a circular chamber. At its center stood a monolithic obelisk of translucent crystal, 30 meters tall. Its facets rippled and shimmered, refracting the lantern's light into prismatic halos that danced on the cavern walls. Suspended at the obelisk's core was a spherical energy node, composed of interlocking filaments that shifted in hue from emerald green to deep sapphire. The sight seized Cale's breath. He had never imagined the Xylorian technology to be so alive. Every instinct urged caution. He raised his rifle, but the weapon felt trivial here, an insect against a cathedral of cosmic power. Instead, he held his breath and approached. The obelisk's surface was smooth, yet beneath it, he sensed layers of complexity, circuits intertwined with crystalline lattice, conduits of force flowing through every plane. He extended a gloved finger, unsure whether to touch it. The moment his skin made contact, a tremor coursed through his arm, as though the crystal recognized him. A chorus of whispers, neither spoken nor mechanical, filled his mind. Fragments of Xylorian chants, echoes of ancient scientists journaling in archived memory streams, warnings of forces both wondrous and terrible. He staggered back, heart pounding. His lamp flickered, and for a moment he saw shadowy silhouettes of Xylorians, figures tall and slender, their eyes glowing, standing around the obelisk as though it were a living being. Then just as quickly, the vision vanished. In its place, the obelisk's energy node pulsed brighter, casting a brilliant column of light upward through a vent in the cavern ceiling, where fragments of broken glass and metal drifted like cosmic flotsam. Cale's rational mind wrestled with what he had witnessed. Was it a hallucination? A byproduct of isolation and stress? Or was the obelisk somehow transmitting memory imprints, allowing him to glimpse archived visions from the Xylorians' heyday? Either way, he realized that this artifact was more than a mere power source. It was a conduit for consciousness, for history itself. He retrieved his datapad and connected his portable scanner to the obelisk's base, initiating a sequence of automated diagnostics he had prepared before he left. Station. The scanner revealed complex multi-layered structures, quantum-entangled nodes, subspace resonators, and what could only be described as neural mesh networks, technology far surpassing anything known to the current Unified Council. As the scanner worked, Cale felt a surge of anticipation. If he could unlock even a fraction of this power, he might transcend the limits of mortality. He might at last escape the ghosts of Varan Prime. But another thought tugged at him, a whisper of caution that threaded through the Xylorian visions. The journals hinted that the obelisk's true purpose was as a weapon, an avatar of destruction designed to combat a threat beyond their dimension. The void, the entries called it, a darkness that consumed stars. The Xylorians had poured all their knowledge into this single construct, hoping to create a champion who could wield it. Yet arrogance and fear had gnawed at them until their civilization collapsed, leaving the obelisk dormant, waiting for a new bearer. The scanner's progress bar ticked slowly upward. Cale's breath came in ragged gasps. He balanced on the edge of destiny. Behind him, the corridor's crystalline veins pulsed in rhythm with the obelisk's energy node. Time seemed to stretch, as though the very fabric of reality bent around this nexus. Finally, with a faint chime, the scanner completed its initial sweep. Data spilled onto his datapad's display. Power matrices, energy thresholds, harmonic resonance frequencies. He absorbed it all, knowing that once he moved forward, there would be no turning back. Leaning over the obelisk, Cale keyed in the final command. Initiate core synchronization. The moment he pressed the confirmation, the chamber erupted in light. The obelisk's facets glowed with incandescent brilliance, and the energy node expanded, its filaments snapping outward like solar flares. Cale felt a shockwave of force slam into him, knocking him off his feet. As he tumbled across the crystalline floor, consciousness flickered. In his mind, 1,000 voices converged, Xylorian scientists, mystics, warriors, each imparting fragments of wisdom, regret, prophecy. And through it all, a singular message burned clear. Claim it. His vision went black. Cale Varus awoke in darkness, pinned beneath a rubble-strewn chunk of crystal. His body felt oddly weightless, as if something fundamental had shifted. Distantly, he heard the hum of power like a heartbeat resonating through the fortress. He lifted his hand to his face and found it trembling, glowing faintly with an internal light. Confusion warred with exhilaration. Whatever had happened, he was no longer merely Cale Varus, exiled pilot. Something else had awakened within him. Something born of Xylorian design. He tested his limbs. His muscles rippled with newfound strength. A single thought propelled him upward, and he crushed the crystal debris beneath his palm. The corridors outside glowed with reassurance. The bioluminescent veins flared to life, illuminating his way. As he took his first steps, he sensed the fortress watching, acknowledging him as its bearer. He could almost hear its silent welcome, a low vibration thrumming in his bones. But deep inside, a whisper of doubt remained. At what cost had he claimed this power? And what did the Xylorians mean by the void? He pressed on, determined to find answers. For Cale Varus, the journey was only beginning. In those echoing halls of abandonment, destiny waited, and beyond the threshold of this ancient stronghold, the galaxy hung in balance. Cale Varus awoke in darkness to a cold metallic taste on his lips. Every nerve in his body thrummed with a sheen of unfamiliar energy, as though his very blood had been transmuted into starlight. He pried one eye open and blinked against a wash of radiant violet light bleeding through cracks in the chamber walls. His senses were hyperacute. He heard the distant drip of condensation, the hum of dormant machinery returning to life, and, beneath it all, a low, rhythmic pulse that felt like the fortress itself breathing. For a long moment, Cale lay where he had fallen, tangled amid shards of crystalline debris. The obelisk's brilliance had melted some of its facets into rivulets of translucent fusion, which now scalded the floor around him. Despite the pain, his body felt strangely invulnerable. He flexed his fingers. A shard of crystal sliced his palm, but the wound sealed its own flesh in an instant, leaving nothing but a faint glitter beneath his skin. He stared at his hand, enraptured and terrified in equal measure. Where once scars and frailty had ruled, now there was only an unspoken promise. Nothing could truly harm him. Summoning every ounce of will, Cale hoisted himself upright. The violet glow intensified as he rose, as though welcoming his ascent. He turned to face the obelisk, which now radiated a serene, steady light rather than the violent flare that had knocked him unconscious. Its central energy node had contracted, the filaments now entwined in perfect symmetry. The hexagonal veins of the chamber walls pulsed in tandem, guiding Cale's gaze upward to a fissure in the ceiling, where fragments of shattered crystal allowed pale moonlight to filter in. Dust motes drifted lazily in the beams, dancing like fireflies at dawn. In that moment, Kyle realized the obelisk had not simply granted him invincibility. It had merged him with the fortress's latent consciousness, awakening its defenses and its purpose. He stepped forward, the ground beneath his bare feet cool to the touch and yet reassuring. Every footfall echoed, but there was no clatter of armor or gear. He felt as though he moved through liquid air, weightless and precise. The corridor ahead was illuminated by glowing veins of crystal that snaked like living arteries through the walls. Cale's instinct, no longer merely reflex, compelled him down the passage. With each step, he sensed faint currents of data streaming from the obelisk, whispering fragments of Xylorian memory, starship coordinates, propulsion schematics, ethereal rites to commune with cosmic forces. By the time he reached the antechamber that linked to the fortress's central hub, the physical changes were undeniable. His senses extended beyond mere sight and sound. He perceived subtle shifts in electromagnetic fields, could taste the iron-laced scent of reactivated circuits, and even felt the gravitational tug of distant massing objects beyond the planet's atmosphere. When he ran a hand along the control console lining one wall, it greeted him with a surge of recognition, illuminating in a wash of cerulean glyphs. They flickered in a language he had never consciously learned, yet comprehension flowed into him effortlessly, as though osmosis from the fortress's own knowledge banks. He placed his palm flat on the console, and holographic star maps bloomed in midair. Constellations streaming with Xylorian annotations, hyperspace routes that shimmered red and gold, coordinates to distant strongholds and ancient repositories. Kyle's mind reeled. The fortress was not merely abandoned, it had been waiting, awaiting someone who could unlock its deepest secrets. Whispers in the fringe markets had spoken of this place as a tomb, but Cale now understood it to be a cradle, a monolithic vessel designed to birth a champion in the face of incomprehensible darkness. He traced a location highlighted in luminous white, a system far beyond Andrioth's borders designated Epsilon Tau 9. A note scroll beside it, written in Xylorian glyphs that melted into his thoughts. Here lies the well of stars, the void's rift leaks, harvest its fury. Though the meaning was cryptic, its import was unmistakable. There existed in the galaxy a wound in spacetime that devoured light itself, and the well of stars was the key to sealing it. Clarity settled in Cale's chest like cooling lava. The obelisk's abrupt reactivation had bound him to the Xylorian legacy. He was no longer an exile seeking refuge. He was the fortress's conduit, its living avatar. The power surging through his veins was only a fraction of what was possible. If he mastered the obelisk's resonance and channeled the Xylorian archives, he could stand against the void spawn threatening to consume entire star systems. But first, he had to master himself and the fortress's layered defenses. And time was already running short. The well of stars would not remain secure forever. Cale lowered his hand from the console, and the star maps dissolved into a cascade of binary glyphs. He exhaled, feeling a tremor of exhilaration. In all his wanderings, he had never felt such purpose. He turned and retraced his steps back toward the main hall, every sense heightened. The fortress's corridors, which once had seemed labyrinthine and inscrutable, now bent toward him like channels of a river flowing to its sea. Doors slid open at his approach, stairways emerged from hidden alcoves, and ancient energy turrets that had rusted silent for centuries reactivated in polite salutes, their targeting sensors recognizing the obelisk's herald. Upon entering the grand hall, Cale paused. The reliefs along the walls had always seemed imposing. Now they felt like silent sentinels affirming his destiny. The Xylorians' carved visages watched him, eyes flickering to life with ethereal luminescence. From them, Cale gleaned flashes of scenes. The Empire's zenith, worlds being terraformed in symphony with cosmic rhythms, the forging of the obelisk itself from star-forged crystal. But deeper still, he sensed the essence of their downfall. An overreach, arrogance that tempted the void spawn into their dimension. Their fear had birthed the obelisk, but their pride had prevented them from using it wisely. Now, centuries later, Kale would have to navigate their legacy of triumph and tragedy. Beyond the hall lay the central nexus, a circular chamber from which 8 corridors radiated like spokes. Kale stepped into the center, and the ground beneath his feet hummed in recognition. Beneath a glass-like canopy, he glimpsed constellations beyond normal perception, ethereal vectors that pulsed with Xylorian runes. He closed his eyes and extended his consciousness. Almost effortlessly, he traced the fortress's energy grid, mapping every conduit, every node, every dormant processor. Where once he would have relied on careful study, now the network unfolded before him in living detail. He wired himself into its flows, activating the fortress's defensive matrix. In the blink of an eye, the world shifted. All around him, the walls pulsed with sapphire light. Hidden panels slid open to reveal dormant energy projectors. Twin sentinel cannons rose from beneath the floor, their barrels sweeping in unison, aligning on each other in zero-point calibration. Holographic interfaces flared to life along the perimeter, displaying threat assessments and power levels. Kyle stood in the eye of a storm, a fortress awakened, roused from slumber by the fusion of his will and the obelisk's core. Yet there was no malevolence in its activation, only a quiet determination, as though the Xylorian spirit had transferred its final hope into Kale's hands. He tested one projector with a thought, and a beam of violet energy erupted, cutting a gash into the stone floor at a measured intensity. The fortress responded with a gentle purr, as though approving his control. Encouraged, he cycled through, each corridor's defense turret, some oriented to shield the approach, others calibrated to project energy fields that could ward off even heavy starship munitions. Wherever sensors detected potential external threats, meteor impacts, gravitational anomalies, interdimensional shifts, the fortress warily extended its awareness, patching up its weaknesses and closing ancient breaches. Overhead, the hexagonal roof panels realigned, refocusing ambient starlight into concentrated beams that washed the hall in prismatic rings. Kyle watched in awe as the entire structure became a fortress temple, both armament and sanctuary. Every device and conduit was now at his command. Yet beneath the gleaming facade he felt a tremor of apprehension. Such power could corrupt even as it defended. The Xylorians had understood this, which was why they had sealed their relic behind layers of puzzles and failsafes. Kyle would need to honor their caution as he tread further down his path. Daylight on the planet's surface had waned long ago, leaving the skies a blanket of ink studded with pale stars. Kale ascended a spiral staircase that wound around one of the inner columns, emerging onto an observation platform high above the central hall. From here, he recognized the fortress's full scale, a colossal ring of spires, each tapering into the night-like claws. Beyond lay the Andriath skies where 2 moons, Pritica and Raxus, hung in static orbit. A faint aurora danced between them, a telltale sign of the planet's volatile magnetosphere. But Kale's gaze pierced past those atmospheric wonders to the void beyond, constellations he now saw mapped on the holographic star maps. Somewhere out there, the well of stars waited, bleeding energy that threatened to fracture reality. Below him, the fortress's courtyard had reconfigured. Fissures in the basalt floor sealed themselves as crystalline formations emerged, closing old wounds and reinforcing structural integrity. Automated sentry platforms rolled into position around the perimeter, scanning the horizon for incoming ships or drifting asteroids. Kyle's mind flickered with questions. How long had the fortress remained dormant? Why had no one returned to claim it? Hidden within the Xylorian logs, he found a fragmented chronicle. After the Void Spawn's cataclysm, the Xylorians had sealed their obelisk and their fortress to prevent misuse. They dispatched a final message into the void, hoping for salvation that never came. Starflare anomalies, gravitational storms, and corporate mining vessels eventually fell upon the husk, stripping its outer armor. No one dared approach, thinking the fortress cursed or haunted. Now Kale would unearth its true purpose. Descending. From the platform, Kale made his way toward the fortress's primary hangar bay, a cavernous chamber that once serviced Xylorian cruisers. Sliding doors parted as he approached, revealing a starship chassis encrusted with cosmic detritus. Its hull was shaped like a crescent moon tipped with spires, a design perfected for both warp stability and planetary landings. With a thought, he commandeered the hangar's power grid. The engines hummed, systems rebooted, and the ship floated free of its moorings, bathed in crystalline light. Holographic displays projected course trajectories and hyperdrive coordinates. For extraction, he could pilot the ship himself, but it was more than that. The vessel's core synced with the fortress's energy flows, imbued with the same Xylorian sapience now guiding Kale. It would respond to his will as extension of himself. Standing before the cockpit, Kale hesitated. This ship, like the obelisk, was a relic of an era gone by. Its technology potent, yet burdened by the memory of its creator's downfall. He had one chance to write a different ending, to harness these star-kissed energies not for conquest, but to heal a galaxy teetering on the brink. He slid into the pilot's seat and felt the ship's interface meld into his neural synapses. Now he perceived every subsystem: fusion reactors, sublight thrusters, quantum flux stabilizers. The ship was far from fully operational. Centuries of neglect had taken their toll. Yet Kale knew he could revive it, channel the obelisk's power through the starship's warp core, bypass obsolete protocols, and ignite engines that could outrun even light itself. He keyed in a destination: Epsilon Tau 9. Immediately, the ship's navigational displays flickered with hyperspace lanes and gravimetric anomalies. The well of stars lay beyond a cluster of rogue nebulae, its coordinates marked by anomalies in the subspace continuum. Kale felt a chill when he stared at the path, a slender thread weaving through swirling clouds of dark matter, punctuated by unstable wormholes. A misstep could deplete the fortress's core, or worse, expose him to the void spawn's tannin scourge. But hesitation would only grant the darkness more time to spread. He inhaled, closing his eyes, and whispered, "Activate the warp ascension sequence." Engines roared, first softly, then in a crescendo that shook the very foundations of the hangar. Energy conduits along the walls pulsed and redirected power toward the ship. The floor beneath him rippled as gravimetric stabilizers engaged, anti-gravity fields lifting the cruiser off its rails. He felt the familiar, intoxicating tug of warp coils coming online. In that moment, Kale was not merely a pilot. He was an axis around which the Xylorian legacy spun, an anchor holding back a void that sought to consume all light. As the hangar doors slid open, revealing the Andrioth sky embroidered with starlight, Kale's vision blurred. He let the vastness of space fill him. The swirling auroras, the silent expanse of black, the distant glint of nebulae. The fortress's sensors relayed live feed to the cockpit, and beyond its protective aura, he glimpsed other starships, trading freighters, scavenger vessels, corporate corvettes, hovering at the edge of perception. None dared approach the fortress, deeming it a dead tomb. Now Kale would change that myth. He engaged the thrusters and the cruiser rocketed forward, leaving behind the fortress in a halo of cascading crystals and reactivated turrets. The ship's nacelles flared with violet energy as it accelerated past light speed. In the seconds before warp, Kale felt the obelisk's presence in the hull, an unspoken promise coursing through every circuit. He realized that invincibility was not merely a shield against physical harm. It was the capacity to endure doubt, to shoulder responsibilities that would crush any ordinary soul. As the ship slipped into hyperspace, the stars outside smeared into streaks of white, and the veil between realities thinned. Somewhere beyond that threshold lay the well of stars, leaking the void spawn's hunger into the galaxy. Kyle's destiny, woven by the ghosts of a long-dead empire, spun forward into legend. And so, as the fortress of Andrioth faded to a pinpoint of violet light behind him, Kael Varys embraced the mantle of Invincible Ascendant. The cosmos stretched before him, vast, perilous, and illuminated by the faint pulse of Xylorian hope. Ahead lay shattered worlds, drifting wrecks, and the gaping maw of the void. But with the obelisk's brilliance awakening within his soul and the fortress's starship carrying him on wings of crystal and flame, Kael moved forward unhesitatingly, knowing that no darkness, however all-consuming, could withstand the dawn he would bring.